So as we're getting to know each other right off the bat, you should just know I have easy access to my emotions. It's taken a lot of work to become able to flow with the energy of emotion. So as I am speaking, I will feel things, and sometimes I will express that emotion through my being. I know it's crazy, because we don't allow ourselves to do that in society. And I had I'll start with a conversation I had last night that was real, right? Let's start in real moments. I had dinner with my mom last night. It's my birthday. It was my birthday, 11/11. And she wanted to do something together. And we've done a lot of repair in our relationship, mostly because of some wounding. I got daddy issues. I had daddy issues. And it's funny, I think now about like, oh, why did I ever let men tell me who I was? Or need them to tell me who I was and how I should feel about myself, right? That always begins at our origin story. It's generational. Um, so, yeah, I had daddy issues. Um, that's a topic for another day because that's a pretty lengthy topic, and it's a big part of the reason I am who I am in the world, helping people the way I help people. But I'm having dinner with my mother last night, and she says to me towards the end of dinner, which is funny, just makes you realize something about families. And this is a powerful moment of recognition about families as we go into Thanksgiving Day and being around families. I want to give you this look into my family. She's like, "Are you always so serious? Do you ever have fun?" And I thought, wow, she does not know me at all. Because that's, I feel like most people who know me, I mean, my name is Joy. No pressure, mom and dad. I mean, it's been a lot to live up to, but I actually do feel like I embody that a good bit of the time. But not around my family, I don't. They don't know me. And what I had said to her, we've had some very, very real conversations, but my children have had real conversations with me, which is so much of the reason I have become who I've become. They have been my teachers and my guides. They have called me out. They've shown me things I didn't see. And so I remind myself of that in these moments with my mom where I just don't even want to go into it. But I want to invite her into the space with me, just like my children have continued to invite me into the space with them. And I'm so grateful for that. And so as I stand here, bridging generations with my mother, I realize she does not know who I am. And I know that because my daughters came to me and they were giving me all these signs that they realized the people around them weren't getting to know who they were, and they kept judging them through the lens of the past. When my middle daughter came to me and she's like, went away to college and I come back and everybody keeps treating me like I'm the person that I was when I was young, but I've gone through so much growth and change and evolution. I want them to meet me as who I am now. And I heard that in her and I said, I want to get to know who you know yourself to be right now. And I said that to my mom last night. I said, yeah, I don't think you really know who I am. I haven't, and then I had to own my part of that. And I said, we're both going to be held accountable here. I shut down. I stopped feeling safe in that place emotionally to be myself because I felt judged. I felt criticized. I felt disapproved of. I felt misunderstood. And because of that, because the people around me, I think, were not aware of how harsh their delivery of language was on this tender being that I just put up some walls, and I was just like, this is who I can be around my family, and it's fine. We can function in these spaces together. And it's just, it's so it's so uncomfortable and compartmentalized. Like none of us have any give and flow. We all have these judgments and ideas of who the other person is. It's scary territory as you go into being around your family and you're willing to be vulnerable again. And I said to her, I am learning. Now that I am good with me, and it's taken a lot of work for me to be able to come to you and say, hey, I'm cool with who I am. Take it or leave it, you know? I am learning to be that person around my family. But I'm pretty sure that's a common thing that we all struggle with. I know it has been something I've had to navigate with my own children. And so, as I'm willing to do that, and so grateful for that experience of that dynamic that we have, I have an understanding and I can look back the other direction and I can give more grace, you know, because I'm like, oh, I know I was just doing the best I could with the tools I had at the time and never intended to cause the wounding that I caused. And then as I became more aware, well, I could change from that point forward, but I couldn't change what had been. And we spend so much time torturing ourselves with shame and regret and thoughts of what could have been that we cannot move into what could be. And I know that that is a scary place, that precipice, right, of what between what was and what could be. What do we call that? We call that the now, right? We call it the present moment. That moment of potentiality. Oh, it's just full of potential. But when we decide that we know which way it's going to go based off of where it went from the past, and that is fear, or what we are not comfortable with in the future, which is fear, we contract. Well, we just can only ever have that experience of life. So I recognize that risk was a part of a thing that I was like wrestling with in my life, you know, the trauma of my childhood. It's hard sometimes even just to use that language, trauma, you know, because it's validating. And it's also hard for us to use because those who raised us, we don't want them to feel bad about it. Again, they were doing the best that they could with the tools that they had at the time. Oh, and the emotions, they're always here. But as we have become more aware of ourselves, we show up differently. Why would we expect any less of those around us, you know? But we have to give each other room. We have to give each other permission to be finding our footing in this new terrain. So I said that to my mom, you know, I said, I just, give me a minute. I think it was about some text messages I sent after dinner. I said, you know, this is so often conversations I have in dynamics where I am doing things differently than I used to do them. I'm saying, give me a minute. I am new here. These are all new muscles. And as a climber now, that has been such a helpful analogy for me to just be able to compare the realities of climbing, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, these particular holds are tricky. But look, I'm getting definition in my arms that I never had before from climbing, you know? But strengthening these muscles, it grows incrementally and gradually. There are definitely things I can do to accelerate that process or to just give it extra oomph and support. But there is also a component of time that just has to pass. And while we can play around with time and accelerate it and amplify it and get a lot more into a short amount of time, it is still something we have to work within in this time-space reality. But yes. So in our family dynamic, as we move into the holiday season with each other. Well, I don't know, let's have a beginner's mindset mentality. That's a consciousness principle. Let's come into the moment as if it's a brand new moment. We've never been here before. And you can do this with every part of life. I have learned it is such a magical formula, actually. Like, if there is magic in this world, I will share a magical formula with you. Come into a moment that may seem familiar to you, but come into it and pretend like you're meeting it for the very first time. Come into a sensation, one maybe that you think you've experienced before, like it's the first time you've ever felt that. What if it was your first introduction? Think about infancy and when a baby is first born and those first moves and those first contact with the world around us. How magical, how full of potentiality that those moments are. We're in this bright world of sensation and light, and we just don't know what anything is, really. We have to learn it all over again because we've been here so many times, but we've forgotten, and now here we are learning it all over again from the beginning, from birth. And we're born into these containers, into these environments, into these family situations who know that we are fresh and ignorant. And they have their limitations often. And more often than not, that's what you get. They share with you their limitations. I heard somebody that I worked with once say, our parents' ceiling is our ground floor. Well, I want to keep raising that roof. What if we're all doing that? And the only way we do that is by staying open to the potentiality that exists within every moment. I don't want to have the same relationships that I've had before. I'm not in those relationships now. They were unsatisfying. If I want to have new relationships with new experiences and new potentialities, well, that will take a different version of me. And the only way for me to show up as a different version of me is to meet every single one of these moments as I go, as if I was meeting them for the very first time. Because the version of me that exists right now is not the version of me that was existing 6 months ago. We could talk about that on a cellular level. We could talk about that on a molecular level. We could talk about that on so many levels, but even just in just a pure consciousness psyche level, the experiences I have been through in the last 6 months, in the last year, in the last 2 years, in the last 3 years, every time I move forward, I'm 46 now. This is a very different version of me. Why would I go back to those same moments and behave as if I was that previous version of me, right? So, it seems simple. It's common sense. But the practice of that is not so easy in my experience. It's taken a good bit of work and cultivation and study and trial and mostly error. If we're going to be honest, my path has mostly been full of error. I learned a lot of lessons the hard way, but experience is a pretty powerful teacher, and I am remarkably resilient. Not everybody. And I know that. And so I don't want you to be hurt by the world in ways that You may not be made to withstand. Because I understand your beautiful, delicate nature and I want to preserve it. I look at each of my children this way and I want to build the resiliency in them while also protecting the wonder and curiosity. Here we are again. It's another precipice. It's another edge. And walking these edges is not, well, it's tricky. As a climber, again, it's a beautiful analogy. What it takes to balance on a ledge. It's not just strength, right? We're getting strength. You can see the definition in my muscle. There's skill. And there's just technique and practice. So that's why we call it a practice of presence, All that exists is the now, and in every awakening tradition, and every enlightenment tradition, and every spiritual tradition, they are always trying to figure out different ways to introduce us to the present moment. And it's hilarious. If you think about it, how many ways, how many recipes there are to introduce you to the moment that you are inhabiting and existing in right now, that you should just be able to just be in, right? Why do we need a million ways to get there? We're in it. We're here. We're now. It's this beautiful tool of the human, right? And here is a people mechanic moment. This, the computer system of the human, now that we have higher technology vehicles that we drive in, we have a better understanding of this. There are some mornings I get in my car and I'm like, why is the screen not on? What's happening with the sound of the radio right now? What's that indicator light? This is it's just a computer storing information, coming up with ideas, trying to make sense of its reality. And so what is a computer for? The utility reason that we have these brains, it's because it has to keep this human alive. We are organic. We are raw, organic material. And in a remarkably fragile reality, our life is basically hanging in the brink, moment to moment of every day, by the way. We think that we can create controlling moments of form, oh, if I can understand this, now I feel safe. Oh, now I feel safe. Human existence is inherently risky. And every spiritual, enlightened being has come to understand this. How do you reassure the human system that it's going to be okay while it's tumbling through space all the time? Which is basically what we're doing, except that now we have the muscles to be able to control and maneuver. How we're falling through chaos all the time. And we're not falling because gravity isn't real and it doesn't actually exist. Right? I'm just trying to break this down to layman's terms. So if gravity isn't real and it doesn't really exist, and we live in a sea of potentiality and chaos, well, it would take some skill to maneuver through that space in a way that was not destructive. And then you have to figure out, do I align with creation or destruction? Duality. It's another spiritual principle. The light, the dark, the yin, the yang. Good, the bad, the heart, we only understand each of these states of being because of its opposite. They require each other in order to exist. We get so caught in the resistance to the polarized, dualistic qualities of life. So I want you to think of those things moving in this direction away from each other while also moving towards each other. Because there is all of this that is existing between them. They're hanging on, they're hanging on right here where they connect, the black and the white, opposite sides, contrast. And then there are multiple layers and dimensions as you move farther and farther away and become opposite, dualistic, polarized states of being. And we as a culture should be able to understand that, right? Look at our democratic system. Look at our belief systems. And the extremes of any side will always go to war with each other. And what happens when the extremes of every side come and they just crash? There's chaos, right? And I'm just trying to explain to you, the listener, in as simple of a way as possible, what I have come to understand after, well, a lot of investigation. And mostly a lot of remembering. And this is why I know this will call to you, because we, you and I, at our origin point, at the source of creation, whatever you believe that to be, whoever you believe that to be, however you want to languageify that, it's the same place, right? They all come from the same place. Now we just expand from there. We're going to keep trying to come back together. We're going to keep moving away from each other. We're going to keep trying to come back together. We're going to keep moving away from each other. Contract, expand. Breathe in, breathe out. And what does that make? What makes a circle? Right? Because it's doing that in equal directions on all sides from a single origin point. The center of a wheel. All the spokes going in multiple directions, right? The most common form you will find in the universe. And not perfect ways, but general ways. And if you break things down to their smallest observable, measurable particles, it always seems to be this, doesn't it? Coming from some nucleus. The atom, right? Moving all over the place, but there is that nucleus that keeps everything together. And what is around that atom? Mostly space. Mostly space. There's like a tiny little electron or a bunch of them, whatever. I don't know, whatever kind of atom, whatever kind of molecule it is. When you start to study life on its smallest form, and then you come out and study it at its greatest, most obvious form, it's always a microcosm, macrocosm relationship. The exterior is always a reflection of the interior. It has to be, because it's holding itself all together in the magic of one creation. And this, to me, makes so much sense. Only because it's the truth. And you and I both know it. And we can just appreciate that together. Or if you don't remember, let me help you find your way back to remembering who it was that you meant to be when you got